Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to another episode of That Creative Life. I have my friends here, Dave and JN, amazing photographers, and I'm going to preface this episode by everyone go on Instagram and search at JN Silva and then at Dave.Krugman. Krugman, did I say your last name right?
You said it perfect.
Okay. And they are amazing photographers, and it's going to give you some context around our conversation because y'all were some of the first photographers where I started following, and it was like, oh, these aren't just Instagrammers, right? These are people who are actually professional photographers, and it's been really fun to watch you guys over the past few years. So welcome, and I'm very excited to chat with you guys and to share your journey. So welcome.
Thank you for having us.
I feel like I need a clap track on here. But just for some context, let's go Dave and then JN. What was kind of the first photograph you ever took that was like, I want to do this for real?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. Mine goes pretty far back. I was fortunate enough to be exposed to photography at a very young age. My grandfather and father kind of shared it as a hobby when my dad was growing up. So they had a dark room in their house, and then, collected a ton of gear, which is actually, I'm lucky enough to have had a lot of that gear make its way, through my father to me. So that was really a huge boon to my photography and my interest in photography. But it was at summer camp, actually. I was like at this creative arts camp up in like northern Vermont. And I was trying to sign up for a woodworking class. I was like 10 years old or something like that. And the woodworking class was full, but they're just like, you know what, why don't you go next door? They're doing darkroom photography. I was like, all right, whatever. And so I went in there and they gave us Nikon F1s, like, these classic film, black and white film camera, or I mean, it can shoot color too, but we were shooting black and white film. And I remember I went down to the water and there's this rowboat kind of like turned over on the shore, and I kind of framed it up. And then I went back with the roll and we developed the roll, and I was like, okay, this is fine. But then there was a moment after the paper, you expose the photo paper to light. It's photosensitive, but it doesn't look like anything until you slide it into the developer. And there's this moment in the dark room, it's like all red light, super moody vibe in there.
Yeah.
And it just felt like seeing the image arise in the developer was the closest thing I've ever experienced to witnessing magic. I was like, oh my God, what is this? And that really got me hooked. And
How old were you?
I was probably like 9 or 10, maybe 11.
Yeah.
It gets hazy when I go that far back. But that was definitely my catalyst moment of like always wanting to chase that feeling of like, you can press a button and create art. Because I always loved visual art, but I was never that talented as a, painter, or, I wasn't that good at drawing. Still am not. But that was the moment where I was like, maybe I can be a visual artist if I can like take this route.
Amazing.
Yeah.
What about you?
Wow, amazing story. I don't know how I can follow this. I was not that young. It was a little bit later in life. I had moved here from Venezuela at 11. And it was a few years later when we moved here, we kind of like left on a whim. So we left all our, belongings and like everything that we had back home. And that included our photo albums. So after a few years here, I was like, oh yeah, there aren't like many photos of me as a child, because all of that was left behind. And I was an only child for most of my life at the time. I was like 15, 16. And my mom remarried here, and, she was pregnant with my little sister, which was like the most amazing thing at the time. And it was when she was born that I happened to have a camera kind of just like handed down. I forget who gave it to me. It was like a 2 or 3 megapixel, one of like the very first like digital cameras.
Wow, that's insane to just hear. 2 to 3 megapixel.
And it was crazy to have that back then. And, I was playing around with it, and I was like, I got to make sure that all of my sister's life is documented since I don't have any of my own images. And she was maybe around one. We had just gotten a new puppy. So we had a new puppy laying around.
A baby and a puppy?
I know. Crazy times in our household.
Yes.
And I took this photo of my sister sitting on the couch with the puppy like right next to her. And I remember like as soon as I looked at it, I was like, whoa, why is this so beautiful? Like I love this image so much. And she had the perfect expression. She had a little like pink hat on, and the puppy was just like so calm, happy sitting next to her. And it was later that I realized we had some really incredible window light coming through, and it was just like casting this perfect like balance of light and shadows coming through. And it took me a while, but that was the first image that I was like, whoa, I feel something when looking at this. It's not just a picture of a baby in a crib, you know?
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then the second one was like almost at, I think a few months later, we, you know, had snowed, and it was like our first snowfall, and I was just getting photos of her, and I was telling her to like throw snowballs at me. And for one of them, she threw it, and I pressed the button, and like my flash went off. And I got this moment where like the snow was coming towards me, and it was like perfectly exposed, and her face was just like so happy, but it had this like 3D-ish effect, and it was, you know, bokeh.
Yeah.
But looking back at it, I didn't know, and I was like, how did I do this? What happened here? How, you know, what happened?
What is this magic?
Out. Yeah, what is this? This is cool. And that was kind of like the moment where I started to get hooked on it.
Yeah, I love that. So you guys were, I feel like, a part of the first, would you say the first wave of Instagram photographers?
I'd say like second
wave.
The sophomore class.
Okay, the sophomore class of the Instagram wave. And for people who aren't aware, I think I got on Instagram in 2011 when I was a junior in high school, and I got my first iPhone. It used to not be on Android. So I remember one of the biggest reasons to get an iPhone was so I could do this Instagram thing. And I remember when I got like 11 likes, I was like, oh, game over. Amazing. But when you logged on to Instagram, there was this thing called the suggested users, right? And I think that's how a lot of initial people who were either talented photographers or somehow were tight with Instagram people, you know, that was a very sought after thing. Were you guys a part of that? Or, because I'm curious, how was the sophomore class of these Instagram photographers? Like, was suggested users, was that still as big of a deal?
Definitely helped. Yeah. So I think that in the early days, Instagram was very focused on this idea of community building.
Yeah.
And basically what a great way to do that is to find people who are using your platforms in like unique and innovative ways, and kind of offer them like a little support or like, you know, attention, or like, you know, we used to go in and talk to them about how, you know, how they could help us in our careers and do all that stuff.
I can't even get an email back from them.
Yeah, not today.
Not now.
Nobody that worked there, including the founders, like really remains. I don't think.
Right.
So it's a completely different company now in my eyes.
Yeah.
But in the early days, it was really this tight knit community of people, and I think that we got a lot of support because we were heavily invested in, you know, community building, which is something that we're still, you know, pretty interested in. And I think that what was so great about the early days is like, you know, we'd host a meetup together and have 400, 500 people that were curious about photography.
And I remember those meetups. I mean, it would be a specific hashtag, and everyone would look forward to, oh, if that person's going to hashtag this. I mean, they started just calling them Insta meetups, right? Was that like the official? Yeah, and then everyone had their own hashtag, and, you know, like the Dallas Insta meetup and stuff.
Yeah,
and I remember I was like, oh, and you would identify some, you know, specific photographers with that hashtag, and it really was what you said, focus on community in the beginning.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's what kind of attracted us to it very much so in the early days too. It was like, wow, again, like what happened as Instagram came out, and one of the reasons it's such a successful platform is it hit the perfect time where all of a sudden visual communication was becoming democratized, where like you had a camera by default if you had a smartphone.
Right.
Before, you would have to go through a pretty tremendous amount of effort to be like dabble in photography. But when Instagram hit, it was like right when everybody got a camera by default.
It was perfect timing.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then there's this huge group of people who are newly curious about visual art. Yeah. And then, you know, if we have a place where we can all get together and become friends and bond over this common interest, then naturally like these friendships emerge and these groups of people emerge. And that was really kind of what defined the early days of this phenomenon.
Yeah. How did you, so that first community that y'all found, whether it was Instagram, what was that next step? Because I'm sure in the beginning, were you guys in high school, college? I mean, were you focused on making a career out of photography, or was this like a very pure, fun, let's learn together experience?
Yeah, I think for me at first, there was no given path to like, oh, if you do this, you'll get work out of it. I mean,
Right.
I was either just out of college or just started working. I was in education at the time. And for me, you know, I was passionate about photography for years before Instagram came out. But up until then, it was a very solitary thing. You know, I would go take photos on my own. And like Dave said, during the beginning days, I would see people hanging out and taking photos together. And I was like, whoa, this is kind of cool. You know, people are getting together and sharing knowledge. And I was very
Which was
enamored by
new
that.
back then, right?
Yes.
Like you want to keep your secrets a little bit closer to the chest, because that means if I share this, then that person's going to be a photographer too. And then that's less work for me,
Competition.
right? Exactly.
Yeah, and I think the magic of those early days was we all didn't know that it would lead to anything past just getting together and like, you know, getting to know someone else and being creative together and pursuing this new interest in visual arts. And for a lot of us, it was just kind of like an outlet.
Right.
It wasn't like a defined thing where like, oh, if we do this, then we might get photo work. I think it was
Right.
just like, that was the purity of it, was pursuing it for the passion.
Right.
Yeah, I'd love to say something too about collaboration versus competition. We found I think we kind of fell into a group of people that were super interested in collaboration. So like, you know, my earliest models when I was getting super deep into this stuff were other photographers, and you know, sharing techniques and equipment, and like we kind of just naturally were extremely collaborative in a way that was very new to me, and I really embraced that and love it. And I think that the misconception about creative work is that there's like a limited amount of space for this work to live.
Y'all, there's room.
And
There's so much room. Come help us, actually.
Yeah, and one of the reasons there's so much room is because the same device that has democratized visual art, which is these smartphones, it's also a display. And that little display in your pocket represents an infinite amount of real estate. So, you know, the demand for visual art and photography, graphic design, video work is vastly outpacing the supply of people that are interested in creative work. So, of course, you know, there's more photographers and artists than ever before because they have access, but actually the places where this stuff can live are outpacing that even so. So if you look at a classic like supply and demand of any industry, it's a really great time to be a creative person.
Oh, 100%.
And we hit this cool window where we got the opportunity to not have to, you know, be cutthroat and compete. And so we definitely have an ethos of like, it's all about helping each other, working together. And that has gotten me so much further than like closing myself off to the people that I could have considered competitors.
100%. It's the rising tide raises all ships or whatever. I really need to get my sayings down because I reference the same ones a lot, but I can never get it perfectly. But that's so true, especially in, I feel like I'm in this little tech YouTube bubble where everyone's so nice. And I feel like there's ups and downs, of course, but everyone's kind of thriving because we collaborate with each other. It's very nice. There's like no drama, but then if you go over to makeup YouTube or maybe vlogging YouTube or family vloggers YouTube, it's crazy how cutthroat some industries can get. And so it's like when you can find those genuine relationships and all of you guys understand that, it really is a magical thing. It's like a really special thing to be a part of. Because something that I've learned with sharing expertise or whatever it is, 95% of people aren't gonna go do it. Like it is very hard, even if it's with your iPhone, to get really good at iPhone photography, right?
Absolutely.
So it's like really the sharing is exciting because it's for those 5% of people who are actually going to take that and go do it, which is really fun.
And to me, that also reminds me, one of the ways I think about this stuff is there's never, I think of photography as a visual language.
Yeah.
And no one is completely fluent. Like there's always more to learn.
Yeah.
And then as you're learning, the technology is changing, the needs are changing, the world is changing.
Keeps you on your toes.
Yeah. And so like, you know, it's the people who are constantly putting the work in and developing and evolving that are going to be leading the pack because, you know, every time you iterate, you're creating something new and exciting and defining the very industry that you're working in.
Totally. I feel like people will be mad if I don't upfront ask the gear that you guys use before we start getting into the nitty gritty photography. We all met, I feel like, Sony Alpha. Were you on the Cuba trip? I don't think you were,
No,
right? So
not.
David was just you. I met you and like a whole squad of Sony shooters. Where did we first meet? Was it Hustle and Y, like one of the events, or?
Yeah, I think it was Hustle and Y.
Yeah, with
and
like
then-
German stuff. Yeah,
then
very
we
cool.
Got a random festivals.
Yeah. Oh yes. I was at for the Honda Civic thing. Yeah, that was fun. And so we have the Sony commonality. Are you guys still shooting Sony? What are your go-tos?
Yeah, I'm still Team Sony. I use a Sony A7 III and a A7R III
Nice.
for most of my photo work and any video stuff that I've done. That's kind of what I've used as well.
Cool.
And just an array of Sony lenses.
Favorite lens? What's your go-to?
Lately, the 135-1.8 actually.
Oh,
Yeah.
very nice. So
Yeah, it's really
you're
good.
saying you would leave the house with only the 135 to go shoot street stuff?
Lately, yes, just because
Wow.
it's such a different focal length than what I'm used to, and kind of
Yeah.
all the images that I get out of it are so cinematic and just have this like incredible depth to them that I just really, really love.
Love it.
Before that, I would say the 35 1.4 was like my go-to for
Okay, I have
everything.
that one. That's the only lens that has ever made taking pictures for me fun. Because usually I'm just 100% video, but whenever I have that on, maybe it's something to do with like a prime and you don't have, it just simplifies things, you know, and that lens is just so fun. I love that lens.
Beautiful
Yeah.
lens.
Yeah.
Beautiful lens. Yeah, I'm also Team Sony for sure. I'm in the Alpha Collective with Jose. But it's funny to be talking here with Jose in the room because he is really the one that like even got me interested in Sony.
Very interesting. Were you Canon before?
I was actually Nikon.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, but I kept running into this problem.
Nikon. Haven't heard them in a while.
I had a D800.
Nice.
But so Silva started doing what were you shooting with what was it called? The Q?
So I did a project with Sony on the QX100,
Okay.
which is a short-lived.
I don't even know
Yeah, it was
what
a very
camera that
short-lived,
is.
but it was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. So it wasn't a camera per se; it was a lens that had its own sensor,
What's it called?
QX100,
Okay.
had a 20 megapixel sensor that also shot RAW, and it was a Zeiss lens. And you would connect it to your phone and use the phone.
Wow. Yeah.
You would literally clip onto your phone,
Yeah.
turn your phone into like a DSLR,
And
or not,
yeah.
or a mirrorless rather.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was like super early on in the game. So
Yeah, like 2013.
yeah, so it was like having a DSLR, but you could just carry it, you know, as a small little lens. That was also a Zeiss
Interesting.
lens that used your phone as a means
As,
of
like, the
as a
brain.
display.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So hashtag iPhone photography, but
But souped up. And then also
new
at the
kind.
time you couldn't upload DSLR images to Instagram. And
I
this thing
totally
somehow
forgot about
bypassed
that.
it. Yeah, this thing somehow bypassed it. So you could
Wow.
So anyhow, I did a project with Sony for the QX100, and I taught a class at their store, a workshop, on how to use it. And you know, I was in education, so
Yeah.
they saw that I did a really good job, or you know, I put a very detailed workshop on how to use this thing. And after that, they were like, "Hey, we're like super interested in, you know, maybe sending you some other stuff to try out." And this was around the time that the first A7R came out. And I remember I was like, "Hey, like I have my whole gear set up. I'm like, I don't know if I want to try this new mirrorless thing out."
Yeah.
They're like, "No, just like we'll send it to you, and you know, just give us your thoughts." And I remember they sent it to me, and I took it to Vegas because I had a job coming up, and I did a helicopter flight. And I was like, you know, I'll use this A7R. Let's try it out. And it was 36 megapixels, which at the time was unbelievable to me.
Yeah, seriously.
And I remember just seeing those images and just like how much there was, the resolution. And I was like, whoa, this is cool.
That was the first A7R, 36 megabit. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, are you talking
And
about the R?
yeah, A7R, the first A7R.
Okay.
But at the same time, there were a lot of things that I didn't quite love about the camera.
Right.
So I
Get
wrote them
dust
and I
on the
was
sensor
like,
all the time.
I was like, you know, dust in the sensor. The shutter was way too loud. It was heavy. It's clunky. You know, some problems in autofocus. But anyhow, I wrote this whole thing and I was like, hey, here's what I don't like. And Sony was super into that. They were like, oh yeah, like give us more. You know, what else don't you like? You know, and that started like a really cool relationship where, you know, I was just giving them a lot of feedback and we started working together. And
I wonder if they're sick at that because I always get asked, for those feedback meetings.
Yeah.
And it's gotten pretty brutal where I'm like, guys, listen, where the hell is the Sony A7S III?
Yeah.
Like, what is going on?
Yeah.
And I kind of got, I no longer get invited.
I've always found them to be like, actually, for the size of the company and how much is going on with them, like we're incredibly responsive to a lot of our feedback.
Yeah.
Like we got into this whole thing with them about we wanted a joystick on the back of the camera for the focus point.
Was that you guys?
I mean, I said it. I know.
I'll take credit
like,
for it.
yeah. I know. Like Sal.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Sal Dialia. Shout out to him. He's like great at giving them good feedback, and they actually listen. And
they're
like,
very receptive.
It'll come, like the new camera will come out, and I'm like, whoa, it's magic.
Yeah,
Well,
it's really
that's-
crazy to see, something that you kind of worked for, or you asked them for, to be implemented into a camera. And a camera is kind of just such a tool for our creativity. To see such a large company taking any of our feedback and putting it into their products,
and to
is
just
mind
feel,
blowing.
feel heard, period, is
Exactly.
very unique.
Let me finish my
Yes.
my Sony kit.
Yeah.
So I have I started shooting Sony because I would go out and meet up with Jose, and he'd be like, dude, this camera is like so small and amazing and powerful. And I have this
What are you
big,
doing?
huge like paperweight. And like, it was such a good shift for me that it's amazing what I take for granted now.
Right.
One of the things is like the electronic viewfinder. Like when you look through that lens, it's like augmented reality on top of the world, right? So when you look through a DSLR, you're just getting reflected light off a mirror. That's it. You don't see what your image is going to look like. You don't even know what exposure, like without.
It's wild to
Without a light
think
meter.
about that. Yeah, like my Canon T3, I know autofocus, optical viewfinder.
Yeah.
That was the dark ages.
Yeah, exactly. But the reason I switched is because I inherited all this legacy glass from my grandfather and my father. And so I was actually taking apart Leica lenses, rebuilding them just so they could fit the Nikon F mount.
Wow.
But then I started looking into, okay, how do I use all these lenses? And I spoke to a guy named Jeffrey Berliner. He's awesome photographer. He runs the Penumbra Foundation in New York, which is something every photographer should know about. It's dedicated to preserving traditional photography techniques and stuff like that. And so I brought him these lenses and I said, I'm rebuilding these lenses. I don't want to actually modify them. And he goes, oh, you should, think about the mirrorless systems. And then so I looked into all the different
the
mirrorless
flange
systems and talked to
distance,
Jose and he showed me all the features and I was immediately hooked. So with a very cheap, thin adapter, I could use these like beautiful Leica M mounts with this
so
augmented
exciting.
reality system.
You know what's so crazy, Dave? I haven't talked to you since in the recent year. My grandpa gave me all of his Leicas.
Oh my
and
God,
it's
we
literally
gotta talk.
like, it wasn't.
I'll take them. Thank you. It's
Yeah,
so
of
sweet
course,
you
of course.
to offer.
So it wasn't, unfortunately, it wasn't like a Leica M6. It wasn't the M system, but he literally had like the OG Leica 2, which, the lenses like pop out. I don't know the correct terminology for that. So he had those. He had the Leica R6. So he had all this R lenses. And so it's been super fun to dive down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And like my parents just recently scanned in all of his old film pictures.
love
And
it.
so this past year has been such a fun experience for me personally, because I've never, again, being around you guys is why I've never even ever called myself any type of photographer. But it's been so fun to see through another person's lens of like their life and their cameras. And I got into film and, adapted the R lenses to the new Leica SL2. And that was so fun to do. And then I got hooked on the Leica Q2 and I'm like, well, I just need to buy that now. It was so fun to use.
What's so fun about the legacy glass is like, if you have the newest 24 to 70 whatever from Sony, like that's the exact same optics as 99% of the people that are buying that system, right? Because these are mass-produced, manufactured lenses. So if you're able to introduce some sort of variable, like maybe a lens that way less people have, you kind of automatically get a different lens signature. It renders color differently. Even like I shoot a lot of rain, and like the old glass, like the way it picks up the droplets of rain is completely different than the newer glass, which is a lot more, you know, a lot sharper, a lot more perfected.
Right.
But there's this beautiful like patina to these older lenses, and you can completely like develop your unique style just by building your little like Frankenstein monster.
Totally.
Camera.
I love it. Well, because I remember in Cuba you had that Nock Deluxe.
Yeah, and I still, that's my favorite lens.
Oh my God.
So to answer that question, my favorite lens is the 50 millimeter 1.0 Nock Deluxe that my grandfather bought and gave to my dad. And he gave it to me.
Guys. Talk about depth of field.
Oh, it sees at night, and when you pair that with Sony that can shoot up to like easily up to like, you know, this guy takes it up to the 20,000s. I personally try to limit myself to like 6,400, but at f1, like I can literally shoot with one candle as the lighting source.
Wow.
So it's really fun.
Yeah, no, that's so fun. And in terms of, because, you know, you talked to developing a style, you guys have done a variety of photography. And Jose, I love your music photography specifically. It's so cool when there's so many photographers shooting one concert, right? But then, you just get that one image that, oh, wow, that was from that same show. That's really cool looking. So in a space that traditionally has been pretty, not crowded, but, you know, that's a thing that people do. Take pictures of people on stage. What was your attitude towards that? And like, okay, how can I make my picture stand out? Were there things that you did in the beginning to challenge yourself, or was it just going to festival after festival after festival?
Yeah, I think the difference, thank you so much for the compliment, by the way. I think the difference that I can perceive between my photography is that I'm actually a big fan of a lot of the music that I shoot, and I listen to a ton of music. And whenever, you know, a person asks me, how can I become better at music photography? It's like, you know, get to know the music that you'll be shooting. Like anytime I go to shoot a festival, first thing I do is if there are any artists that I don't know on the bill, I'll go and listen to them. And there are so many more things you can kind of anticipate when you know a song and you know when the drop is coming and you know the moment's going to come and there's, you know, a big crescendo or something and you know the artist is going to do something cool, then you'll be ready for it. And otherwise, it's the one thing that I really love about music photography. It's not only about how prepared you are, but there's also a lot of luck involved because, you know, the lighting is always moving around. The artist is always moving around. You never know what's going to happen. So you kind of have to really be on your toes. And like you said, sometimes there'll be 50 people in the pit and you're all trying to like move around and get that perfect angle. But, you know, the artist will choose one side and you're like, and
you might just be screwed. Yeah.
And then, you know, you might have the wrong lens on. So there's a lot of elements that come together that I think a lot of people don't really think about when looking at music photography. But if there is any moment where I can translate, you know, their artistry into a single image, then that to me is, you know, like my job well done. So I just try to match the intensity of their art to what I'm creating at the moment. And I think being a big fan of the music is a part of it.
Are you someone, when you're in those situations, do you kind of spray and pray, or are you someone who literally just is still taking single pictures and you wait for the moment? Or are you shooting, you know, the 15 frames per second, or how?
It depends on the artist and the festival and kind of like my mood going in. There are people who are just way more active and you never know what's going to happen. So for example, like a Travis Scott, you know, he's going to come out and he's going to jump and there's going to be pyro and there's going to be smoke and you never know, you know? So for those kind of instances, you kind of want to just shoot as much as you can and review later.
And how many, the A7 R4, is that what we're using, or 3? R3, how many pictures can that take per second
I'm
without
not sure. What is
blacking
it, 23
out?
maybe? 30?
No, the R3 stops at like, isn't it 11 or 12?
No, it's more than that.
More than that?
Yeah.
It's a little
So
more. I want
it's
to say
decent.
like 30. Yeah, no, it's good. It's never failed me.
Yeah. Like,
no.
It's the electrons.
I will say this: the A9. I shot with the A9 for a bunch of festivals, and having the no blackout was a game changer at the time. It was crazy to just not see the shutter and continuously see what is going on.
Oh, totally.
That was really, really cool. So
can I say something about the way you shoot shows?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So
let me hear.
One of the things I love about your style and how you do get these unique shots is like you're not somebody who's married to the pit because you're so like into the music that you actually like, you're not like, oh, I'm going here to shoot. You're like, I'm going to a show and I'm going to come out with some beautiful images.
Yeah.
So like you'll be in the back, you'll be in the dead center of the crowd. You don't like, just take it as an opportunity to make photos. You take it as an immersive opportunity to like be in the music. And I think that's really reflected in your work.
Yeah, I love that.
Because you get different angles than like the typical person that's just snapping away and like solely focused on the image.
Thank you. Yeah, for sure. And I think that also goes back to just being a fan of the music and being passionate about it. You know, a lot of the photographers I know, they'll be in the pit for, 1-2 songs and be like, oh, I got my shot.
Yeah.
And, they'll go edit right away, because for a lot of these festivals, it's kind of like not the best photo to get to them first, because they need to go out.
Right.
And a lot of the times I'm like, yeah, but I'm really here to enjoy this set, So I'll shoot, I'll get in the crowd. And then when the crowd sees you as a photographer, that you're like vibing with the music and you know the lyrics too. And then you're just kind of like one of them, and you're like, oh wow, this guy's really cool. So a lot of times they'll like make more way for me to get in between them. Or
have you guys ever had the issue of an artist using your picture or a model using your picture and like not tagging?
Oh, all the time.
And like how
that's what I had for breakfast.
Like,
yeah. This happened just now.
Like I understand like if someone pays you your rate to take pictures, like that's their picture, they paid for it. But there's so many instances where it is like, oh, you didn't pay for that, or oh, this was a favor, or oh, this is kind of what's expected. And then asking, I guess it's very common. So you kind of, I guess, just move on with your life, or how do you handle?
I feel like at a certain point, the stress that comes from worrying about that stuff far overweighs the,
that's a good way to look at it.
But a lot of times it's like, some really big artists, if they tagged you, that could give you a lot of opportunities.
Yeah.
So it's kind of sucks when that happens, but I kind of just roll with the punches, and I'm here to make the art and just keep going.
Definitely.
Yeah, to me, anytime new technology emerges, there's new etiquette, right? And a lot of times, especially like the more famous somebody is, they're separated from you by many layers of publicists and agencies, and the content flow is like very complex.
No,
so by the time they get it, they don't, a lot of times they don't even know who shot it. And my favorite type of people of celebrity note are the ones who are willing to correct that error, or or if they post something and there's no credit, and a bunch of if somebody posted one of his photos, he has a very loyal base of people who love his work that would be like, spam. Yeah, this is Jose's photo. And a lot of those artists will, like, good on them. They'll be like, it's so easy to just edit and put it in there. So I think, anytime there's new technology, there's new etiquette, and it's like the community kind of defines what is the right thing to do.
Right.
For us, I try to tag everybody involved to a reasonable degree.
Yeah.
Like, I always want people getting their credit. Like, if someone's doing makeup for one of my shoots, I want other people to know who did that makeup. And that goes back a little bit to that, let's work together, not let's not work in isolation and try to step on each other to get to the top.
Totally.
Let's share knowledge, share information. Yeah. There's more power in numbers together. So.
100%. Dave, my favorite genre of your pictures are, maybe it's because I live in New York, but again, it's you out there, rainy vibes, New York, misty, rainy. It's just vibes.
Yeah.
Like it's vibes. And do you, in terms of like genres of your photography, there's this weird separation, and I feel it all the time, where it's like doing it for the art, and then, I need to like pay bills, right? And I've seen you kind of like fuse those things, and that I saw that like Vibey Razor ad you did.
Oh yeah.
Like that was sick.
Thanks.
Sick. So how do you balance that? Because sometimes those pictures that make people follow you, that make, oh my gosh, that is so unique, that's sometimes not necessarily what people are paying for.
Right.
How have you kind of found that balance? And then are those conversations you have with brands of like, listen, this is my style of picture.
Yes.
If you want that product, it's going to have to be in there my way.
Right. So I used to work internally in an agency, BBDO, and I loved that job. It was awesome. It gave me a really good understanding of the brand side and the client and the agency side of things, like what conversations are happening in those rooms. What the client is looking for. So when I was able to make the leap to freelance, like more on the, personal creative side, I had a huge advantage of knowing how to talk to clients,
right,
what they're looking for, how to explain my vision in a way that, like, what I tell younger creatives and people like trying to break into the industry is like, everybody has a job to do. If you can make their job easier, like they are going to come back again and again and again because everybody wants a little bit off their plate. So for me, if I come with a more of a creative vision, like for the razor ad that you're speaking of, you know,
it's less work for them.
On the first call, I'm already like, here's what I'm thinking, here's what I want to do. And they're like, oh, great. Well, you know, like as long as that touches on our brief, then, you know, we trust you. And the other advantage is that I work for myself. And when you're an outside entity, like you get a lot more, in my experience, creative control. So if you're in an agency, there's a whole system that's working, right? And you have to be like a part of that. You know, you're a cog in a much bigger machine. So you get a lot less say about what the machine is going to do. But when you're an independent creative and a brand has come to you because they want access to your audience, like you're the person that they're going to trust to say, here's what's going to work for this project. So that being said, I get a tremendous amount of creative freedom, and that's something I'm really grateful for. In terms of making sure that my commercial work and my personal work can kind of live side by side, I think that's a very interesting line to tread, but the way I try to do it is like I've spent years and years and years developing this aesthetic, right? And it's very like dark mode, like neon lights, rain, weather, just like very cinematic looking. Yeah. And that's just a layer that I can really add to almost anything. Like, you know, I did a half year's worth of content for Honda social media. And it's like, they let me play with that. You know, we took a car and like drove it down a Brooklyn street that had the fire hydrant spraying all over and like people running through it. And so that created this like environment of rain that because of my personal work exploring street photography, I know exactly what to do in that scenario to make those drops like pop out and stand, you know, we have the headlight shining through it. And you can create these cinematic moments. The reason I love my personal work and my street photography is because it's like improv jazz or something, right? You're thrown out into a situation where you
never know what you're going to get.
You have all these overlapping variables, and a decisive moment is kind of lies at the confluence of these different variables. And how can you, with your eye, kind of pinpoint down this intersection of variables in a way that is visually compelling and tells a story? And so every time I'm doing street photography, I'm just doing that for fun. So by the time I get into a shoot and there's all this stuff going on and all these variables coming up, you know, it's like freestyling. I'm ready.
Yeah, you're ready for it. Yeah, Jose, you've worked with people like Samsung, and where that again blurs those lines of photographer and let's just see it, guys, influencer, right? It's for some reason we hate that word, but you guys are influencers and also photographers. I would say photographers first. That's very clear. Again, guys, if you haven't checked out their Instagram yet, check it out. But your recent work with Samsung was really cool, and you showed off a phone, but also you're out there shooting really great pictures. And I am curious whether it's like a percentage or how these things come to you guys. Where is it influencer first? Is it, hey, we need these images on your Instagram. How do we get there? Or is it, we love your images. Can you shoot for our bigger campaign? Can we use it on our socials? Can we use it here? But also, can you post it to your socials? How break that down for me?
Yeah, I think it's changed a lot over time. And I think for Dave and I both, at first, once our numbers became inflated or whatever you want to say on Instagram, all the brands were like, yeah, can you post for us? Can you post? Can you post? Share this. And, they give you all the metrics of how many times and how many things. And at first, it was early in the day. So I was like, you want to pay me to post on my Instagram? Like, what?
Yeah,
this is insane. My very
what is
first
this? Yeah, sure.
My very first,
whatever you want.
Yeah, my very first paid gig was for Cartoon Network. And it was, it was Rick and Morty.
Oh, that's such a good
wow,
for the premiere,
that's good.
For the premiere
show ever.
Yeah, for the premiere of Rick and Morty, they did an installation right next to the Flatiron. And it was like a spaceship had landed, and it was Rick and Morty, and I was like,
Crash.
Oh, what? A show? Right? Yeah, sure.
Dave's like, I was there. I was a fan.
I just know the universe of Rick and Morty.
Yeah,
I think they probably crashed.
Yes. And, an agency contacted me and like, all you have to do is show up, take a photo with your phone and post it on your Instagram and say, Rick and Morty coming out this Monday. And I was like, wait, what? You're going to pay me to post on Instagram? Like, I triple checked. And I remember, I did it. I went and I tried to make it as cool as possible. And I posted it. And this was the biggest lie I've ever been told in my whole career was like, I posted it and someone from the agency came down. They were like, oh, let me see the post. And I showed him. He's like, all right, I'll be right back. And then he left. And then he came back like 10 minutes later with a check. And I was like, whoa, I posted it and I got paid right away. This is the best thing in the world.
That is so not normal.
It was never happened again.
The fact that was your first interaction with that is hilarious.
Yeah, shout out Mobile Media Lab. That was
wow. For some context, guys, I've gotten paid. I've had to sue.
Oh yeah.
This German agency to get paid for something that was literally a year and a half ago, and I just got paid the final check. They did it in segments.
Oh my gosh.
Because they weren't liquid. They were literally a funded startup, and so they were using all of the money that they guaranteed to pay the YouTubers with for their own, like, to pay their employees and stuff. Right. So. Yeah,
it's a mess out there.
It's a mess out there. So that's amazing that not only like Rick and Morty, but also you got paid on the spot.
I just signed a deal that has my payment is net 90. Oh yeah. And I like tried to negotiate and I was like, but it's
at least they're being honest now.
I'm like, okay, so like you're gonna send me a check this summer, like, and I'm doing it now, like, okay, it's crazy. That's the crazy part about being a freelancer. You can't really. You don't have the ability to control necessarily like the pacing of your income sometimes.
Yeah.
The craziest thing to me is the disparity between when you're working and when they come at you with the brief and they're like, well, you have to be there tomorrow and you have 30 minutes to shoot and then you have to give us the images 2 minutes later and we need to be copyrighted and need to be out because it's a very urgent manner. And you're like, oh, yes, I will make it work. I will do all of these things right on time. And then as soon as you do it, they just disappear, and then you're like, "Hey, I've done my part."
Yeah. Like who? What? Sorry.
Oh, sorry. We have to send this.
New email. Who's this?
Yeah. We have to send this through processing to get to accounting to get to our business department.
Yeah.
Right.
It's always
it's so fast on your end, but then when it comes time to pay, it's like, oh, what?
The number one quote that every single time I follow up, especially on the ones that are like net 60 or net 90, which are ridiculous in my mind, but the number one thing is like, oh, you know what? We just followed up with accounting. There was some mistake. Oh, yeah. The check's in the mail.
Always a mistake.
I'm like, oh my God, I want to put something in my contract that's like, if I have to remind you to pay me, I need a 50% increase.
Exactly. There's all these things in contracts that anytime I, complain about it, I try not to. Yeah. But anytime I put something on social media, you get all the people that come through with the contracts and they're like, here, and then you had this and you had that and you had this. I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, do you guys work with do you have a lawyer who checks contracts and stuff, or do you guys go through it on your own?
I mostly just do everything on my own.
Yeah.
I even manage myself, which I'm kind of unmanageable. So
I'm just shaking my head.
Yeah, if you want a good example of how not to do this, it's us too. Business wise. But
the legal side, but I think that just frees up more time for the creative side.
Yeah,
totally.
I think you and I could both be a little more responsible on that end, but we also, are kind of like tornado of creativity spiraling through the world has gotten us to some really cool, interesting places together.
Yeah.
So
Tasmanian devil of.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
So there's a little bit of controlled chaos that is like
always
the fuel for my creativity.
Yeah.
Okay, but going back to how this whole thing started. So I think at first, a lot of companies were coming to us like, yeah, post on your channel, post on your channel, post on your channel. And over time, as our like creative identities kind of solidified and we came more into our own, we started making a lot more of a collaborative effort where we're like, hey, maybe this is how we want to showcase, or maybe we want to work to make your brand better, or maybe shoot for you to
you can
to
license these images
to post it on your channels. And then that turned into more like creative consulting, and you're like, how can we help you come across as a more genuine brand, and how can you empower creatives in a better way, without making it seem like you're taking advantage of them, to just be like, hey, go influence.
Yeah.
There's definitely a big shift. I think as Instagram, when Instagram got bought by Facebook, that basically gave them an incredible safety net and also like a huge boon of resources and security, meaning that like brands were finally able to invest you know, a lot more of their budgets and their interests into Instagram specifically. And when that happened, I think it did open up the doors for us in terms of, well, if you're a big major brand, who are you going to go to make work that thrives on Instagram?
Right.
Like probably the people who are making work and thriving on Instagram.
Right.
So it's kind of like platform centric work. And they started, you know, the deals became, oh, you know, you'll post and we'll pay you, but the meat of the contracts now is a lot more like, we want to license your work for us.
No, that's great.
And that actually pays, for me, it pays a lot better.
Right.
And it's also just more authentic to what I want to do.
Yeah.
I've never been the type to be like, hey, like, you know, just like, again, you said that the word influencer, and it's like, there's such a connotation to that word. But it's like, I've always tried to think of a better way to describe what we do. But it's like,
I'm a content creator.
yeah, but even that, like, so I have a problem with the word content, because content is like,
like, what is it?
it's just too big of a bucket. Like everything fits into it, right?
Yeah.
Content is literally anything. There's content everywhere. So if you say you're a content creator, it's like being like, if you're a doc, it's like being a really incredible surgeon and be like, I work in medicine.
I work in medicine, yeah.
And it's like, okay, but like, we're not really having a conversation yet.
Yeah.
So like, what do you do?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh.
I'm so grateful being a YouTuber is cool now, because now I'll just say YouTuber. But before I was like, I'm a filmmaker.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I'm not. I do wedding films in the beginning, you
but
know?
also, you know, we've had words for what we're doing for centuries. I mean, we consider ourselves artists. Yeah. And we're artists with followings, and I just wish I could smash that into some
artists with
word
followings
that would stick.
And if you think about it, I don't know how it was back in the day with Picasso and stuff, but things are changing at such a rate where I feel like we have to even be more flexible with our art, whatever that is, because not only is the actual art of it changing, but the platforms are, and the mediums are actually changing, and you have to be very flexible to that. And so I am curious, as we were talking about earlier, how y'all were the cool kids in the beginning with Instagram, right? It's this new thing. I'm sure older photographers were like, screw this, what is this? You're sharing your work, you're a part of this, like you're telling them your secrets, no, screw that. You guys embraced it. And now we've come there's a whole new wave of social media sites, right? And there's YouTube and Twitter and TikTok and all of these things. How have you guys maybe evolved as Instagram has evolved? And are you curious about these other platforms?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, change is the only constant, right? So none of this stuff is permanent. And I think the key is to be open-minded and be flexible. Because I do know photographers that were like very well-established photographers that in principle hated what Instagram was all about, because it was this kind of like, you know, once you put the work in and you made it past the gatekeepers and you become like a published famous photographer, the idea that you could reach more people by giving it away for free is like the antithesis of what you've learned and worked for. And I think that there's a tendency, and I even feel it in myself, to like look at the new waves of content coming up and laughing it off as not, you know, oh, this is just clickbaity, or like it's too
youngsters out there.
Yeah, but I always try to remember how I felt, you know, with access to a new platform and to have the gatekeepers removed and being able to be in control of my own distribution network, which gave me a career and my creative freedom. So I salute the people doing, you know, thriving on these new platforms. And I just hope that I can like figure out something that works for me, where I don't like make myself irrelevant by being unwilling to evolve.
Right. Jose, you said you're getting into music more. You know, you love music and you're getting more into the artistic side of that. How's that going? What does that mean? Are you learning Pro Tools, Logic? Do you have a little?
So it's learning Logic
MIDI
and Ableton and all of the software that comes with it. But more so, I'm trying to start at the very, very basic roots and really going in for like music theory and the history of music and taking music courses. And just, I feel like if I can, you know, learn just the basics of the music, I can appreciate it better. And it's such a big part of my life. Like literally from the moment I wake up, I'm like, okay, what am I going to listen to right now?
That's awesome.
You know, and I just put music on. If it's not in my house, it's in my headphones.
Who are some of your favorite artists?
Of all time?
All time.
George Harrison is like my idol forever and ever. My style icon too. I try to look like him all day, every day.
I see it.
Thanks. Means a lot. But yeah, George Harrison is a big influence for sure. Recently, Tame Impala, their new record just came out. Kevin Parker, I think, is a genius artist. Michael Kawanuka is another incredible artist who I've been listening to a ton recently. Of all time, I mean, there's so many. So
many. Do you listen to how do I say this without sounding so old? Like the SoundCloud rap generation? Mm-hmm. Like, did you get into them at all? I mean, it's definitely matured now. I mean, all of these guys are
mainstream. I'm always listening to pretty much like music from every angle, and there were a lot of rappers. I'm not so much into a lot of the newer like trappier sounds. I do listen to it, and like I think there's a time and a place for it, and like you put on Roddy Ricch in the right place and people going crazy, and like you know, it's something different when you're immersed in the crowd and they're performing. You see the impact that it has on people, so you know, I can respect it if it's not for me, but I can still respect the artistry behind it. But yeah, I'm a big fan of them. I'm a big fan of everything.
When you approached music to learn more about it, did you already have an end game in your brain on how to make money on it? Because I think it's so, when we're like professional creators, I feel like I can't have a hobby. Like, okay, I love making videos, right? I still love making videos. And if I have another creative pursuit, I feel like automatically it's like, okay, well, how am I going to monetize this, right? Do you already have the game plan, or do you find peace in, hey, this is going to be my hobby for a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. For me, music has just been a long-term thing to think about, just because, you know, over the past few years, I was like, well, if I start music now, like when will I be any sort of decent? And there's such a threshold between where I want to be and where I am. Yeah. And now it's like, you know, if in 20 years I can make one cool song, I'll be happy with it.
Yeah, I love
But
that.
also for me, you know, I've been trying to get more into video, and my main thing, anytime I do any sort of video work, is getting the music to go with it. And like the royalty free stuff is so bad. So I can never get myself to make any sort of, you know, I'll piece together all these videos and I'm like, but the music is terrible. I can't.
Jose, do you want to buy my URL musichustle.com for $10,000 and start your own music licensing website? Yeah. That was my dream 5 years ago.
I'm going with this music theory thing. So just
there you go. Okay, good. It's so funny. Literally 3 episodes ago, it's full circle. I went through with another friend who does entrepreneurial stuff, all of the URLs that we own. And literally 5 years ago when or 5 years plus, freshman college. It's weird when I realized that was longer than I thought. I bought musichustle.com. It was like $1,500. So I like sold off all my guitar equipment because I played electric guitar for like my entire life. I love music. And I was like, I'm going to solve this problem. But I was literally a 19-year-old, no connections in the industry, such big dreams. And it worked out fine. But it's so funny because I think, or not funny, it's very serendipitous how music, I think, follows a lot of creators. And it somehow always comes back, you know, in really interesting ways. But yeah, we still need good royalty-free music. You know, they're trying out there with Epidemic and Artlist and all of them. Yeah, they're trying.
We need more artists out there. More people making music.
Oh, yeah. I think it's just so hard to make money off of it that people get discouraged really easily. That's what happened to me. I was like, well, I got too into the gear. I stopped practicing, and I just had so many guitars and so many amps and pedals. And I was like, wait, when was the last time that I practiced?
Right.
you know? Yeah. Do you guys ever feel that with photography? Or when it's your job, I guess you practice enough, right?
Well, I'm very like, I'm just not, I don't think either one of us are like that gear obsessed in any way. Like,
no, that's true. Yeah.
I have a second Instagram account that I shoot for just as much, and it's only with my iPhone.
Wow. Okay.
And that is because like the number one question I get online, it started 5 years ago, was, hey, you know, I have $1,000 to my name, like in my whole life. Like, should I buy the Canon Rebel or the Fuji? I'm like, look,
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. And also what you're texting me on can do most of what you want to do,
That's so
especially to learn. I think that it's actually easier to learn shooting mobile than it is to shoot with a complex camera.
It's the argument for film too.
Yeah.
You really learn to appreciate the basic things of framing it up right, because you're not going to get a second chance,
And
right?
photography is so much more about how you see things and the art of observation than it is about the newest gear.
Right.
So I just say to anybody trying to get, into this stuff, like start with your phone, start small, like make sure you really love it. Find you can even find your style. Yeah. So I don't get too caught up in the gear side of it. I do love like, a good lens or something like that.
Good knock deluxe, good $10,000 lens.
Yeah, exactly.
Man.
I'm like, it doesn't matter. Just
Gear
shoot on
doesn't
Leica
matter.
glass.
Yeah. Oh, that's
But
good.
no, I do really mean that. Like I've learned a tremendous amount about photography by limiting myself to my iPhone at times.
With that, with everyone having phones and it being super saturated, I mean, honestly, the moment Instagram and the iPhone 6, that was kind of when I was like, oh, what the heck? Why is this so good? A lot of people call themselves photographers now, right? But it wasn't until I kind of found y'all's little pocket of photographers that I was like, holy smokes, I've said this 4 times already, but I was like, there is something unique. I don't know how to put my finger on it, but these are people who are bringing in their own perspective into their work. And so how, like for someone who's maybe been shooting on their iPhone for years and they love it, but maybe they're just having a hard time standing apart because it is so saturated, right? What's some advice that you would give to them?
The first piece of advice I would give is don't fall into the trap of trying to please the algorithm. Don't shoot don't shoot for numbers, because if you're shooting for numbers, you're going to pigeonhole yourself into creating work and getting literally trapped in a cycle of making things you don't actually love. And that's defeating the purpose of a creative life.
Yeah.
A creative life for me, ideally should be you are becoming more and more unequivocally yourself and attracting the people that like you for who you are.
Right. Yeah.
And that's my goal. Like it's very tempting to take that like super oversaturated sunset shot with beautiful girl dead center in the middle, like walking into the distance. And that's going to get a lot more likes because this is the first time we've ever really had pop photography.
Right.
In the same way that we got pop music after electric instruments were more democratized and computers. And, so there is this strain of visual art that is extremely crowd pleasing, but it's also the most generic rush to the middle kind of game. And it's a really good way to get numbers, but then you're stuck making this kind of like sugar coated, unrealistic, like I always look at those pictures. I'm like, what is this a picture of?
Yeah.
It looks like it's a picture of color or, it's like, it's a cool way to learn about specific techniques. Maybe if you're like, oh, like look at all this crazy bokeh or prisms or stuff like that. But I think the key is to like make sure that there's a story or a subject or something in there, and make sure you're doing what you really love. Because if it becomes your job, it's going to be most of your life.
Yes. What about you, Jose?
Yeah, I think to piggyback on what Dave is talking about here is just one, be as genuine as you can and be true to yourself and be real with yourself. Because if all you want is the end goal, if you were coming into it and creating this art with the end goal of I just want bigger numbers, then that's going to show throughout anything you make, so it's not going to come off as genuine. And you can always tell who's doing it because they love, photography or music or video, and who's doing it because they want a certain level of success and influence.
Yeah.
But I think if you stay true to yourself, it might take a little longer, but the people that truly connect with you are the ones that are going to matter most. And 2 is like seek out and find the communities of people that are doing the same things you're doing, or like-minded people who are like trying to get to where you want to get to. And if there isn't a community, then make one. A lot of times, you just, one of the first things that happened to me, I was super introverted, and, Instagram used to host these like worldwide meetups. And I saw that a weekend was coming up in New York and no one had organized anything. And I was like, wait, what? No one's organized everything? Someone was like, why don't you organize it? And I was like, I'm so introverted. Like, I don't know if I want to do this. And I was just like, I kept waiting for someone to, organize something. And for a lot of things, just people don't want to plan. People don't want to be the planner. They don't want to be the one that's like trying to get everyone together. And that's like,
also people are lazy.
yeah, people are lazy. I'm lazy.
And busy.
Yeah.
Me too.
And
Yeah.
I'll be a part of this. Just go to sleep.
No, and
exactly.
especially now, it's really tough to get people together with a common goal.
Yeah.
Especially, in a creative pursuit. But we're all out there, and there's a lot of creatives who are like looking for guidance or looking for communities, and they're just too lazy to organize something or too lazy to get out, from behind the screens and meet up in real life. And I think a lot of what, the conversations that I've heard and that Dave and I have been a part of lately is how do you bring that sense of community back? How do you get more people together to create art in collaboration? I think for a long time, we all, got our path started and our careers going, and, you were focused on doing things yourself and being the one man band man and just doing everything, design and copywriting and doing all these things. Whereas I think now we're all just more concerned with working in a team and how do you make better things together with the people that you really respect and, have a common interest with. Yeah. And I think for anyone starting out, it's just, create these groups or look to work with more people.
Love that. Wrapping things up, what are you guys most excited about right now?
I'll again piggyback off what Jose just said. Like, I've been having a lot of conversations with people about how do we create a space for people that is less numbers driven. How do we create a space where people can be themselves and meet other creative people? Like, in the early days, that community was essential for my creative life. It literally would not be doing this without those people. And Jose is one of those people for me. Is like, we became friends because of this shared interest, but it came from meeting in person. Right. Like, I can respect his work from a distance as much as I want, but that real like bond of friendship and that has led to so much professional success as well through our, working together and stuff. Like, that came because we actually got together in person with other, there's a ton of other people we could include, yourself included. So I'm really interested in creating a space for people to find that type of connection, just like we did. And I'm going to have a lot of news on that soon.
Yeah, so definitely. Yeah, depending on when this podcast comes out, I'll put links down below. It'll probably be out in like 3 to 4 weeks, but stay tuned to their socials, and I'm sure people
I have a lot coming up, and I've been working on a project in the background for like a year now, and it's about to be ready.
Awesome.
And
it's so exciting.
It's going to be all about like, again, rising together, strength in numbers, and also just this, I think there's a valid need and want to push back a little bit against how much social media has encroached into our creative lives.
Yeah. That's epic. Jose, when are we going to hear the mixtape? When's that dropping?
Mixtape coming real soon on TikTok only.
Good. Exclusive TikTok release.
Yeah.
Add an air horn right
there. You go. Hopefully I'll be making some stuff soon. I'll get back into it. I'm just too critical of my own stuff all the time.
You gotta get out of your own way.
But one thing is I'm hanging out with a lot more musicians, and I kind of want to marry my interests and where I've gone with my creativity and shining a light on all these other creatives who I think deserve a voice or deserve to have a bigger audience. And how can I empower them and help them create some art together, and how can we work together to amplify our messages? So I think that's what I'm working on this year.
Epic. Guys, thank you so much for being on. It was such a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Of course.
Amazing.
An honor and so much fun to discuss stuff with you.
No, it was fantastic. And I want to I feel like there is such a cool photography community here in New York. There's so many people. I feel like we should have like active roundtables just about creativity. And
we were
so
talking
fun.
the other day, like we did one for Adorama. Again, that Saul did. And it was like, we're like, why don't we do more stuff like that? These conversations are so important. And again, like in the pushback against this, like, I consider social media like the fast food of information. So it's like, I feel like for the past 5 years, we've all just been like shoving chicken nuggets in our face like every day. And like now I think we're like ready for the
maybe we're ready for
the more like gourmet, like slow cooked, longer dinner.
Yeah.
Change my diet.
Yeah.
I'm ready to change my
Yeah.
diet.
No, for real.
Beautiful metaphor, guys. No, yeah, I love that. And so, obviously, everyone go check them out on Instagram. All their socials will be linked in the description below. Make sure you're subscribed to That Creative Life on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, wherever you listen to podcasts. And until next Monday, thank you for listening. Guys, thank you for being on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.